Florida Congressman Byron Donalds joins me now. Congressman, what role does Congress have in beating anti-Semitism? Is there anything you can do?
Well, Stuart, it's great to be with you. We've passed several pieces of legislation dealing with anti-Semitism at the federal level. A lot of this really now is going to stem on law enforcement. We're really grateful that Kash Patel and the FBI have stepped forward immediately, investigating this as a terror attack, as they should. And then also with supporting President Trump in his efforts of deportation, getting a lot of people out of the United States who frankly should not be here. And then also making sure our vetting processes for people coming into the United States are significantly better than they've been in the past. Those are the things that Congress actually can do and step up and do. And so, we had a piece of legislation last Congress, H.R. 2, dealing with border security. And there's some stuff we need to do around visa reform to strengthen the visa verification process, the investigation processes. And then the last piece, this illegal in particular, is the visa overstay. We have a significant problem with visa overstays, and we have to get our hands around that. One of the things, a bill I supported, Stu, was creating a biometric exit system. This was a recommendation of the 9/11 Commission. That way, when people come into the country, they have to verify by biometrics, and when they leave the United States, we have to use the same verification process.
I got it, Congressman. I'm going to change the subject. I want you to listen to what Senator Rand Paul had to say about the big, beautiful bill and the debt.
The math doesn't really add up. One of the things this big and beautiful bill is it's a vehicle for increasing spending for the military and for the border. It's about $320 billion in new spending. To put that in perspective, that's more than all the DOGE cuts that we found so far. I think there are four of us at this point, and I would be very surprised if the bill at least is not modified in a good direction. I want the tax cuts to be permanent, but at the same time, I don't want to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. The GOP will own the debt once they vote for this.
Well, President Trump responded to that on Truth Social, and he says, quote, if Senator Rand Paul votes against our big, beautiful bill, he's voting for a 68% tax increase and, perhaps even more importantly, a first-time ever default on U.S. debt. Is this going to be on President Trump's desk, signed by July the 4th, Congressman?
Now, I think it is, Stu. I think there's going to be no doubt about it. At the end of the day, we're not going to allow a 68% tax increase. Republicans are going to step up and make sure that we maintain tax levels for all Americans, top to bottom, and all businesses, whether they are large or small. We're going to do that. Now, with respect to the debt, Senator Paul does make a point. There are many more things that we need to do from spending, and I think the bond markets are telling us that we have to get our long-term fiscal trajectory under control in the United States. And so that's something that Congress has to continue to work on. We're going to go through the appropriations process this summer. I would challenge my colleagues in the House to make sure that we start cutting spending on the discretionary side as well. Look at these agencies. They were bloated. They were increased under COVID-19 by Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. We need to get that spending out of these agencies, get those levels back down. That actually speaks to the president's discretionary budget that he released about a month ago. We need to do that work as well.
Senator from Missouri, Senator Josh Hawley, he says a Biden Secret Service agent told him troubling news about Biden's years in the White House. Just listen to this.
He told me that Biden used to get lost in his closet in the mornings in the White House. I mean, the guy literally stumbling around in the White House residence couldn't find his way out of his own closet. The president of the United States. I mean, this is outrageous. We were lied to.
Meanwhile, Bill Clinton says Biden seemed fine. Listen to this one, too.
I saw President Biden not very long ago, and I thought he was in good shape. The only concern I thought he had to deal with was, could anybody do that job until they were 86? And we'd had several long talks. I had never seen him and walked away thinking he can't do this anymore. He was always on top of his brief.
Well, I don't mean to be sarcastic, Congressman, but was that willful blindness?
Listen, Bill Clinton's lying. Let's just be honest. He's lying, frankly, again. Joe Biden was not capable of doing the job. We all know this. The man, it's not just his mental capabilities, in my view, is also his physical capabilities. He wasn't able to hold long extended meetings with members of Congress, and that's Democrat members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, Republican leadership. He wasn't able to do it. They would send him out there every now and again to do a speech or to speak to the press, and if the press started asking too many questions, his staff would come in and break it up. I've heard the stories that when he was meeting with the four corners, that's the speaker, the Senate majority leader, and the minority leader in both chambers, if he got off script, got off his note card that the staff gave him, they would get him back on script or get him out of the room and end the meeting. This is what was going on. They lied to the American people. They covered up the fact that Joe Biden was not capable of doing the job, and that's why the Oversight Committee is going to investigate.
Yes, it is. Congressman Byron Donalds, thanks for joining us. We always appreciate you being here. Thank you, Congressman.